Welcome to today's episode of Symposium. Today we are in the holiday spirit. It is the Halloween weekend, sort of the post-Halloween weekend. It is Day of the Dead. We have decorations on the mantle. We have decorations on ourselves. It is totally themed out. I am Amber Shelton.
I am Marvita Punch.
And I'm Caroline Wall.
So last time, we left off talking to Caroline about value theory in her dissertation, and we wanted to transition today to something else she's working on that has to do with combat sport and values associated with violence. You presented this paper at a conference, so give us the details.
So last May, I presented this at a conference on mixed martial arts, combat sports, what have you. But I basically wanted to take a look at combat sports as a unique realm for exploring a set of values that's particularly easily distorted, is what I wanted to argue. So basically in the paper that I presented, I look at values associated with like strength, physical power, and then, as you were saying, Amber, violence. And what I wanted to say about those is that when we look at value phenomenologists like Max Scheler, at least in the case of strength and physical power, it seems like when things are going well for us, we don't perceive those as negative values, we perceive them as positive values. So Scheler talks about vital values that are associated with health, vitality, as the name would suggest. Basically, there's something about being like a living organism as well as an evaluator that makes us responsive to seeing those values born by other living beings, like in a positive way. It should strike me as a good thing when the cat is in good shape, or when I see my friend and they've clearly been working out. Like, that seems unambiguous to me, as though things are going well for them, or maybe better for them than when I last saw them. But it's not clear that this is always the way that the story goes. It seems like when we come into contact with strong bodies, we sometimes also have like kind of a fear-based response, or like even a repulsion towards them, sort of driven by these associations with the threat of domination that kind of strength or power like poses to us. So basically they're values that take on baggage in a particularly easy way. So it's useful to have a kind of arena, a restorative arena, I guess, where one can kind of work out one's relation to these values in a kind of safe environment with mutual trust, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. So here is why I am thinking that it might be problematic to engage in combative sports or in violence, or like sports that involve some kind of violence. And my thought is that like we are not the best judges of ourselves. When we are calm, we think that we will act responsibly in the heat of the moment, or when we are angry. But if we like develop a certain skill, I'm worried that we might want to use it or misuse it in the wrong moments. So maybe we shouldn't develop skills that we are likely to misuse.
Right, yeah, and with combat sports, if the skill that you're developing is something like being able to punch in an efficient way, or like strangle someone in an efficient way, then that's certainly not the kind of thing that you want to see misused. So I think what I would say to that is that the person who is showing up to a combat sport to engage as a competitor and to develop like a set of excellences in that realm is doing something different from the person who's showing up to express their emotions physically or like vent anger on another person in a socially acceptable, like physical way. So there's nothing stopping the person doing the latter thing from showing up over and over again, and continuing with it. But I would say for the genuine practitioner, if we want to use a no true Scotsman kind of framing for it, what you're doing when you show up to kind of perfect the technique of grappling, boxing, what have you, is you're not going to be developing a habit of using your strength based on your emotions or something. You're going to be developing habits pertaining to, when my opponent has their shoulders this way, then this is what I should do. When I see a straight punch coming, this is the way I ought to block it. And I don't think that doesn't have the level of danger associated with it, I think, or like that your question seems to be implying. Like, if someone does physically confront me, it probably would be a better thing for me to know how to block or not. But if that's really the skill set that I've been developing and the habits that I've been cultivating, then I don't think that disposes me to use it in inappropriate contexts where it's not called for.
Well, maybe an analogy from philosophy, the discipline of philosophy, might be helpful. Like, we all know that like the philosophical circles could be very combative and like very competitive, and we are trained in like getting deeper and deeper, asking more questions, giving counter arguments, and we can easily find ourselves arguing with people who are not trained in philosophy. And sometimes we might be misusing our skills in a bad way, and so many like normal people might find us like too competitive or like too argumentative, whereas we are just thinking that we are just like using our habits, like it's like unconsciously, implicitly. So I'm worried, I think that similar thing can happen in combative sports as well. Like they might easily get into fights in the heat of the moment, even if they were not training themselves for that.
I mean, I take your analogy about like aren't philosophically trained people a little bit more argumentative than average? Like, don't we just, by merit of having a hammer, want to hit nails with it? Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's a fair worry. I think that in both cases, when things are going well, there's not that much interest for the skilled person in using that skill set against like someone who's not going to be a willing or interesting competitor. So like it's different if Amber and I are both given a debate podium and are going back and forth on like an issue where we're speaking the same language, using the same concepts, and like in part of an agonistic conversation of some sorts. Like we're being combative in a sense, but I don't know, I mean, we're both using that as a way of demonstrating like our relative excellences and like this relation of contest to each other. That's different from like if I'm going onto Reddit and finding some fool and trying to run circles around him with like my fancy jargon. Like that would be a stupid use of my time and just not rewarding at all. So I don't deny that sometimes we do in philosophy overuse that toolkit in places where it's not called for, just by virtue of using it so often anyway. But I guess the other thing there is that I think the lines are blurrier between different like conversational tones you take towards a person versus are you making this interaction a physical one? Like that line in most contexts in the United States that I am walking around in anyway is like a very bright line. Like as soon as you cross it, like it's deliberate, it is unusual, everyone will be looking at you, like it's starker, I think, like in the circumstances where I find myself anyway. Like there are just huge incentives to not, or huge costs to misapplying that skill set. So mileage may vary for like other places, other situations.
And then, can you expand upon how I am improved by like perhaps like refining a fighting skill set to like how am I like made more virtuous or like more like ethical or better, or like am I just getting stronger or more fit or more healthy, or is like how am I made better by like engaging in harming people for fun who also harm me?
So ideally you're not harming each other. Like, I mean, I guess the way that you asked it earlier was like, is it necessary that, or like, is this mostly a thing about a person like feeling comfortable or like getting something out of engaging in these things? Or is my paper like even more broadly just about how I feel about you doing those things, or how I feel about you having like massive guns or something?
Like how do you see me, or does it have to do with how I like start to look at the world now that I've got a shredded body and I can rip people up?
So it is relevant, first of all, for like you engaging in these things yourself. That's definitely something that the paper means to encompass. So like this guy Paul Linden, who is an Aikido instructor who I draw on in the paper, I in general looked at like testimony from martial arts instructors, like boxing, other martial arts instructors, as well as like soldiers coming from CPTSD context, that kind of thing, just to see how people were describing their experiences in combat sports. And so this guy, Paul Linden, who teaches Aikido, was saying that several of his students were children who were victims of sexual assault at early ages, and who, like, as they got better and better at Aikido, started having like this 1 step forward, 2 steps back process, because they felt so conflicted about developing that kind of strength and like ability to potentially like physically dominate someone, when that was specifically the thing that had harmed them earlier. So they started to see that as resembling something that they saw evil, and that generated this kind of negative, very negative value judgment regarding themselves. So one would hope that like continuing in that context and working through those feelings would be extremely productive for someone in that kind of a situation. Like coming to feel like it is not a bad or evil thing for me to bear this value strong or powerful, that sort of thing. But then, the broader point of the paper was definitely also, how can I, as an evaluative agent, feel about you if you are strong? And ideally, having these kinds of healthy engagements with the values of strength, physical power, etc., in this kind of controlled environment would help me if I bump into you and your shredded guns on the street. Have more of a response like, wow, what an excellent person, or what an admirable kind of like shape she's in.
Okay, so I have a question about, like, for example, given that like women are physically very vulnerable and they still like suffer from a lot of violence, especially like in Turkey, for example, femicide is very common. So like I tend to feel that like, why should we perpetuate this unequal physical abilities which are misused by men, for example, most of the time, not always. Don't you think that like violent sports or combative sports exacerbate this unequal physical strength in a bad way?
So I guess it depends on, well, I mean, the answer is no, I don't think they do. I guess there.
Not necessarily, but is there a correlation? Like,
I really don't think there's a correlation. Like, just anecdotally, the people who I know who are in combat sports are people who get a lot of pleasure from, like, treating these kinds of movements and acts as controlled, as, I don't know, kind of working out a puzzle with another person, engaging in this sort of cooperative activity with them almost. I mean, it's obviously kind of contest-based as well.
But I think there is something unfair when women are forced to learn those sports to combat men.
I
we
do say
should just
forced to. I
Yes,
said,
I'm
like if
even
you want
encouraged
to.
No, of course, but sometimes I want to learn combative sports, but it's not my, for example, like special interest. I would learn it in order to feel safe, but it shouldn't be on me to develop this capacity. It should be on men not to use this capacity, and if they should like forget about all of these capacities, like maybe they shouldn't, like they should do everything to forget about those capacities, because they have been misusing it historically. And
so, like, I think that having that be at the forefront when thinking about, like, what would be the point of engaging in combat sports is kind of precisely what one would hope combat sports can free you from. So, like, thinking the point of them is to, or the point of them for me anyway, would be to be able to go out in a practical context and feel, like, safer and feel like I'm more capable of defending myself. Like, I guess what I'm arguing in this paper is hopefully they do serve that purpose, but wouldn't it be better if you were getting something out of them that wasn't just sort of this preoccupation, which might be, like, motivated by very, like, practical, like, valid reasons, but able to get a different kind of value out of them.
Sure.
Outside of, like, that kind of preventative sense.
But, like, if they are getting value, like, why don't we get that value from other kinds of sports, non-combative sports, like swimming or running or just doing like weightlifting? Like, why combative sports if the goal is to exercise your bodily sickness and health?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is something that I've thought about with, like, potentially developing into other projects. But it seems to me like with other sports like softball or swimming or something, the sort of way that you're able to be in contest with another person has to be, like, abstracted or made, like, symbolic in a sense. Like, we set the term, the way for me to win or to lose is whether or not I can get to that side of the swimming pool faster than you, or whether or not my team can toss the ball in this complicated series of motions so that it hits the base before you can slide in on it. And it seems to me like the form of contest you see in combat sports is the kind of thing that you would start doing on your own as, like, a 5-year-old with other 5-year-olds. It's also the kind of thing that, like, my dog does with other dogs. Like, it's just sort of maybe one of the earliest forms of contest. So I think it's cool to be able to engage with other people in that sense.
Yeah.
Ooh, I'm just gonna, like, present, like, I don't know, my devil's advocate side against that. So, like, okay, but, like, can't you practice this sort of, like, one-on-one battle of mind and body with, like, other sport, like, or, like, with chess or tennis and stuff, and still get the same sort of stimulation and engagement with another person in this, like, strategic way, in a way that doesn't involve, like, learning to improve a capacity to overpower other individuals. Like, the things that we're getting out of that exercise, can't we be doing it in ways that don't involve, like, valuing powering over people?
So I guess I would maybe run your question backwards a bit and just, like, I guess one of the points that I want to make in this paper is it seems like we oftentimes see, like, physical power as negative or threatening or something because it has the ability to, like, dominate people, but to dominate people, like, in ways things that are so like coupled up to like status, bending them to your will, making them do something that they don't want to do. And that's like something extra from just the question of, if we are in an altercation, can I get on top or not? Can I get myself in a position where you can't hurt me anymore or not? Like, those are two different things. And if we're just looking at the sphere of, well, can we, if we're in a like grappling match, get to a submission position? Like, that doesn't necessarily have to do with any of that other stuff. And similarly, like, other sorts of contest could be coupled up to those things such that they could present a threat to us. Like, I don't know, if, to go back to the philosophical debate example, if I get into it with you and I'm like, my intention is to humiliate you and to like make you look bad to everyone else or something, then yeah, I think that starts to look just as threatening in a sense when, you know, it's your career on the line or something.
Yeah. Now I see. This was so helpful. Yeah, because I was like wondering what could still be like derived as valuable if we're just trying to dominate people. But I kind of have never seen like physical domination as being like in some sort of combat situation as being divorced from values such as like humiliation and like inducing fear like in somebody. But like, this is really interesting how those become decoupled in this context.
That's really the heart of the paper. That's
interesting.
To be able to show up into a context where these things are like very firmly decoupled is like super restorative of those values, I would say. Like, we do kind of think of the bar fight example when we're thinking of like the ways that we encounter physical power in like real life. Like, you say something and I decide I'm offended, and then we take it outside, and then my guns are bigger, so I get to make you say sorry.
My guns are real. You don't get to say shit. What a cool paper. I'm so excited to see how it develops more. And I'm so happy that by the end of this conversation, it all like kind of came together for me.
Excellent.
Like in a place, right there it is. Yeah, so we're interested in what you all are thinking about this. What do you think about combat sports? Do they like seem disturbing or immoral to you? Or do you admire people who cultivate these skills and these strengths? We would like to know. Please comment. It is so interesting to us to hear from our viewers.
Yeah, go watch a UFC fight.
Ooh.
Thanks for watching us.
Bye.